Now, the goal here is to over time learn the ability to analyze ourselves and the external world without becoming so preoccupied of every little thing that we do. Hey guys, Jamil here. Welcome to Mindset Reader, where I share you unique insights and ideas you can use directly in your own life to break through mental roadblocks by using perspectives outside the status quo, by using a more powerful mindset while on the path to your passion. I went through a lot of these while starting my journey, and through relentless learning, I found ideas that work for me and might work for you that are either backed up by science or experience, that teach you how to connect newer ideas with your existing insights. Ideas that develop you into a more independent thinker. Today, we're gonna dive deep into our sense of self and why seeking things outside of ourselves is short-term for happiness. Kanye West said, when we die to the money we can't keep, we probably spend it all because the pain ain't cheap. We tend to identify things and thoughts outside of us. And when we do that, to think greater than how we feel seems impossible to do so. We talked about this a little in my other videos that I'll probably link right here or something. But that was mostly on how to deal with external forces effect. Also, I'll link you guys to another video to a neuroscience by the name of Dr. Joe Dispenza, as well as all the books in the description below I learned this from. With this video, I want to dive into the internal things to talk about how our ego has an unquenchable thirst for thoughts that lead to narrative. Contrary to my title, you don't need to destroy the ego if you can understand it. My goal of this video is to help you realize you're good as you are, and you don't need to obsess with who you should be. Because when I was first starting on my passion, it was so hard for me to realize that I already had everything I needed to get to where and how I want to be living. You are already whole. It's just a little hard to realize that. We can ruin or rebuild our reality depending on how we connect our opinions to certain facts, even if those facts reign to be 100% true. With that being said, let's have a conversation on the process of how I came to that conclusion. Before we get to this process, we gotta talk about why we humans of all beings have the ability to think in the first place. Remember the neocortex that I talked about in this video? You know, the hub, the thing that gives us consciousness. For you to understand the words I'm saying right now and be aware of you, hey, hi, hello. Well, for you to understand what I'm saying, your cortex has to put things through a network called the default mode network. And through this network, you can perceive the world. Animals that don't have this can go about its day without thinking about itself going about its day. Put simply, if you ever wondered why dogs can shit with such confidence in public, that's why. Instead of perceiving the world, they're able to just exist in it. Whereas humans have the capacity to reflect on if waiting until they get to the toilet is the best approach. Being aware of self is the default mode network in action. That's self-awareness. Being self-aware is an amazing skill, and I talk about how we develop that a lot on this channel. Although, having too much self-awareness can actually make you depressed, because then you develop a tendency to always reflect too heavy on yourself. Although not having self-awareness at all turns into someone with a victim mentality. So we're just gonna learn how to balance the two, okay? The type of self-awareness I'm trying to explain here is the ability to note a thought or a feeling and then just move on from it, rather than holding on to that thought or feeling by, let's say, a memory of Margaret stealing your lunch 6 years ago. This is obviously an extreme example, but what I want you to realize is that this happens to you on a different level. You may look at the person getting mad at Margaret, but you have to realize that our levels of bullshit are on a different spectrum. We all have different levels of bullshit. Let's take two completely different people from similar upbringing. These people didn't necessarily have any advantages or disadvantages. We're gonna call them Henry and Maya. Henry thinks he can't get the job in the wealthiest nation in the entire world because of a group of certain people who look a certain way. Not realizing that he's just not an attractive candidate and he's not willing to do the things to fix that. And he would rather just have the president just build a wall. On the other hand, we have Maya over here who can't start a dream business. She believes that she doesn't have enough time or money to do it, and that the rich have made the market completely oversaturated, so there's no space for little people to kind of get into the market and start something of their own. When in reality, the fear of failing and looking crazy in front of her family and friends, as well as the energy and money she spends every single weekend on partying, is the actual problem. Most people would agree that Maya's reasons are much more reasonable than Henry, but regardless, Maya is feeding herself bullshit. It's the fact Henry can't get a job. It's an opinion, it's because of other people. It's a fact Maya doesn't have enough time or money to get started. It's an opinion, it's because of a saturated market. All these facts are true, but it's not gonna change your circumstance. By validating the same wrong reasons over and over again in the same way, you'll keep producing the same results over and over again. That's insanity. My rule of thumb is that if you've triggered your fight or flight response in a situation where death isn't a legitimate possibility, then I'm probably preoccupied with some bullshit and it's time to start asking some questions. We become so preoccupied with our abilities, our environment, how much time we have, how we look, how we sound, how we smell, and sometimes how we're feeling, and if that's affecting how the people around us are feeling. When in reality, nobody realizes those things because they're preoccupied with what's going on with themselves. When you're so preoccupied with the things external to you, your brainwaves are fluctuating in a high beta wave state. Or in other words, your thoughts are super scattered and you're operating in survival mode. I tell you this because I want you to understand that no matter what the situation is, what you are feeling is a very real thing. Neurologically, is that a word? It is difficult to think yourself out of a situation, even if it isn't particularly a stressful scenario. So go easy on yourself, please. We all just have different levels of sensitivity to this. So we're just gonna have to learn ways on how to calm them brainwaves and build up a little bit of a tolerance, all right? Also, if you wanna learn more about brainwaves, you can check on the article I put in the description below. There's some really important stuff in there and it'll help you fix this on the deepest of all levels. That's the problem though, your focus of your mind is on I. You become the object of your attention. That's why when facts are presented to you, they're all gonna line up in a way that's gonna line up according to your self-image and your beliefs that you already have. Once you learn to take a step back though, you're gonna realize that those facts are just facts and those thoughts you have are just thoughts. And even though thoughts can influence how you feel, your identity is not connected to who you think you are as a person. Henry and Maya are a perfect example of them setting bounds on their abilities, just to find the facts to be in line with who they believe themselves to be. When at the core, you actually don't have an identity. We're gonna get into that, don't worry. The difference between us and the dog that takes dumps wherever it wants is that the thoughts that we have, good or bad, have the ability to paint our reality based on our self-image. The dog isn't preoccupied with itself, ever. The preoccupation of self is ego, is the default network. The examples I just shared with you is an example of ego in action. Unintentionally we become so aware of self because at all costs we're trying to protect ourselves from danger, losing, or being wrong. When we're in danger on a biological level, it makes sense to make ourselves the #1 priority when you're, about to die. But sometimes our ego gets activated when no danger is even around. And the problem with trying to fix this is that we have just a terrible understanding on what ego actually is. We just think that ego is that person at the gym who lifts more than he obviously, or a power tripping boss who just can't get fired because he's just been with the company for too damn long, or the person that's so obsessed with their looks. All great examples of ego, but what we don't talk about is that ego is also the person who's way too scared to even get started on something they've always wanted to do because of what other people might think if they were to make that change with themselves. Ego is thinking nothing about you needs to change to get what you want, and the people that have what you want or what you would view as success just got lucky. Notice the common theme here, the attachment to identity. To discover how to tame your own ego, you can't only take matters into just logical thinking. By using analysis, argument, debating, or intellectualizing, you must experience the reality of the other side first before you can begin to see the truth. I hope that makes sense. Basically, if you start analyzing a stressful event with the same brain, the same ego, the same personality that brought the event onto itself, you're in survival mode and you won't be able to think in harmony with your mind and body. Your body is naturally going to act in the only way it knows how, by using the same subconscious habits you've been using all your life. We cannot begin to make the brain better until we learn how to operate from a state of calm above the identity that we're attached to. Because matter can't change matter. Energy changes matter. Change your energy and change your life. Only then can you speculate on your intuitive guesses on what the problem with your ego actually is. And then that's where you begin to dig. So what is ego at its core, you wonder? It's a mind-made sense of identity that consists of multiple narratives that you identify with. Think of a narrative like a long chain that starts with initial thought of, let's say,
oh, I could never do this.
As you add reasons to that initial thought, the chain gets stronger until it becomes a narrative that you believe. You can have two people with that same initial thought of,
I could never do this.
And the strength of each of their chain is going to depend on how preoccupied with that initial thought that they are. So in turn, that same thought is going to tell those two different people two different narratives, because one might be able to let the thought pass by and the chain will break early before it gets way too strong. And the other will keep adding thoughts to that narrative until it becomes locked into being a belief to them. Sometimes the chain goes on for so long that you develop a little bit of Stockholm syndrome to that narrative. When that kicks in, we become so attached to the narrative, even though it's negative, just because it's so familiar to us. Once we get to that point, we begin to unconsciously defend this for our entire lives. And then that's how the identity is born. The scariest thing is that our bodies don't know the difference between an imagined experience and a real experience. So it's just gonna attach itself regardless, which is why well after the event that created the narrative, we still live in sync with it. Because the narrative is now a part of us, the moment that we try to remove or separate ourselves from this narrative, physiologically you could feel the pull in your body. Which is why if you're watching this and you're wincing at the thought of all this, it's because it's causing you to question your own narrative. And that's a perfect example of the ego wanting to stay with that narrative. I mean, you've been with that narrative all your life. I mean, it's been so long. It knows all your friends, it knows your whole family. Of course it's gonna be uncomfortable breaking path. That's completely reasonable, and here's why. Okay, think of it like this. Your body is the addict, all right? Your ego is a drug dealer that sells a supply to the body, and the narratives you live by is the supply that your body's addicted to. The initial thought you had that started off the narrative of, oh, I could never do this, is that friend your mom told you to never hang out with, but you end up doing it anyways, and then now he's urging you to just try to supply one. Understand your body is willing to do whatever it takes to get that supply so it can reach that high. It's a true class A addict. Listen, it would actually betray you in a heartbeat if it didn't need your brain to function. If you've been taking the supply of I can never do this all your life, the withdrawal you feel would be so real if you were to be suddenly cut off, which is why you feel that pull in your body when you're trying to separate from that narrative. So it's not so much that we're insecure about how we look, about how we sound. I mean, it's that stuff, but more so, it's more about if we're coming across in line with that narrative we think we must be. If we attach ourselves too much to narratives, then there's so many experiences that we're missing out on because we're restricting ourselves from doing certain things by setting in stone who we should be. The area of what we can accomplish now has bound. When trying to do anything outside of the narratives we created to identify ourselves with, our mind as a default network, as the ego, literally feels homeless. The nature of your ego trying to deny itself its own emptiness comes from it trying to fix itself, trying to find a secure home as if it's not secure already. The mind then rejects itself with shallow thoughts and shallow pursuits just to reject its own emptiness. But when we go after these, we don't understand that that's a bottomless hole. I mean, you might be wondering, can't we just do like a dog and just exist as we are? Yeah, that would be cool. But if we were able to shift the focus completely off of completely off of me, then we're in a position to really thrive in the world. Arguably better than the dog, because that's when we're able to create whoever we want to be. If you're wondering how Robert Downey Jr. Oh my god, that movie's so funny. Okay, if you're ever wondering how Robert Downey Jr. was able to go from Kirk Lazarus from Tropic Thunder all the way to Tony Stark from Iron Man and do an amazing job of both, he's a dude, played a dude. That's too funny. It's because he has no attachment to any narrative. He decides to just be. Whether it was intentional or not, he has taken the time to learn how to exist with that emptiness of the mind. So rather than fighting it off, he just decides. Most creators, actors, top business people, that guy from the corner shop who's just insanely nice and funny, they're all able to exist in that blissful state because there's no attachment to a narrative, because they don't mind if there's no narrative to attach to. They don't need to be a certain person, they just are. Understand that the mind is already whole as it is. The sense of self the ego is so desperately trying to create through money, through a certain identity, and through material wants and needs can never be created, since the nature of the mind is emptiness. So that dog that takes dumps I was talking about earlier, he's actually one-upping us. You thought we were always this high and righteous, huh? Taking poops in toilets while everyone else in the animal kingdom has to do it in bushes like peasants? No. We once pooped with them side by side. You have to remember that being conscious is a pretty new thing in the grand scheme of things. So it is a pretty big change, which is why this battle between having an empty mind and sticking to a narrative is so strong. But on the other side of this is the healthy ego, and that's where we could one-up the dog that dumps. So the real question is, what does a healthy, non-rigid, formless ego look like? It looks like having 100% certainty on your vision, but able to let go of like the changes and mistakes that's gonna happen to you along the way of your journey. Being comfortable with being told that you're wrong and and acting of compassion even though you know that that's something I need to work on. I'm working on it, okay? This happens by learning to stop trying to force the how of things coming to fruition and learning how to bask in the mental image of being in there in the now and trusting your body to act accordingly. Remember, your body doesn't know the difference between a real experience and an imagined experience, so trick it. We have to learn how to not take ourselves so serious when we mess up, myself included, which is why I continue to work on this every single day. And honestly, over the course of 2 years, I've seen some massive progress. I used to be pretty insecure as a result of not knowing that this was the result of an ego that was walking on eggshells to make sure I was acting accordingly with this narrative that I created in my mind. As I became less attached to that narrative, I noticed things became easy. I'm not worried because I trust that I'm doing the work necessary within to be and feel as if I'm already the person necessary to reach my goal. Not in the way that the narrative I'm in is locked in, but in the way where I'm open to suggestion, in line with I decide, not my emotion. I started to gain trust within myself, and since you're human too, just like me, we're not so different, and I know you can do the same. All you need to know is that you will arrive there. Yeah, it's still a narrative, I guess, but would you rather have a narrative that's chosen for you or a narrative that you choose and that you're free to move around with? By thinking you're not capable to do this, you're giving up control to your body's emotions to run the show. If we cannot think greater than we feel, we can never change, because the change is to think greater than you feel. It needs to remain that non-dwelling reality and realize it's enough as it is. The benefits will be is that you'll be in a spot of finding that thing that you're able to do just for the sake of doing it. You don't need anything in return. You don't need any money. You don't need anything. Just enjoy doing it. And if you're in that spot, there is absolutely nothing you can lose. An ego without attachment to a narrative doesn't need anything in return. Meditation is an amazing tool where you can mold your reality to get to this point. Now, I don't know any legit meditation techniques or anything. My strategy is just literally close my eyes and let my thoughts run around and just fascinated how crazy I actually am. But I do know the nature of the mind is empty and spontaneous, just like the nature of the world. Let your mind run free until it can rest. Also, changing my behaviors resulted in the change in my thinking. You can check out my video series down below on how I did that. It's free, okay? What's better than free? We were not born to overanalyze. Walk outside and observe how any kid under 5 years old interacts with the world. Our self-awareness was not given to us to worry about how each single step on our journey until death is meant to pan out. We would never play a video game that we love like that, so why would we do that with life? Our awareness is meant to be used to craft our own vision and not to be at the mercy of what our body feels, the influence of our environment, and the pressure of time. Stay stubborn on the vision you set, but flexible in the detail. I'm clearly not a psychiatrist. I'm just some guy who reads books about other people talking about this. I was watching YouTube videos and whatnot. But when you think about it, everyone else in history has learned all of their knowledge by building up their own perspective from what other people are talking about. So I don't know. Although between all those perspectives that I learned from, I learned that there is a similar theme. Switch the narrative by changing what thoughts you pay attention. You can imagine and feel that you've achieved the goal in the future by experience the feeling as if it's happening right now. Once you're free from the narrative you're so used to being in, you can be happy now as well as every single day you work towards your goal. Okay, so like this is the end of the video. I don't really know how to transition out. But if you made it this far, hit that like button so YouTube knows to share this video with more people, so we get more people in our squad existing in the state of mind with us. Check out the description below for psycho-cybernetics and also breaking the habit of being your... So psycho-cybernetics and breaking the habit of being yourself. These are the 2 books you should look for in the description down below. Those 2 books sum up a lot of what I'm talking about perfectly. And while you're digging around the description box, make sure you join my free video series on how to think. Thanks for watching to the end. I really appreciate it. Till next time.